Um, Thank you, Doug, for taking us through what is KORCSAS. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
And do I have permission to screen share?
You should.
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
How you do?
It's still saying that it's disabled.
Okay, now try it again. Sorry.
There we go. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to have you on the line with me today. Let me tell you kind of what's prompting this subject today. And this is predominantly driven for people that have done group facilitation more than one-on-one, to be candid. It can be used on one-on-one, but it's really much more, I think it's really much more effective when used in a group facilitation setting. What prompted it? I was facilitating a group of people that really knew which end of the butter knife to hold on to. And they were all pretty senior guys. And I kind of got the impression that they were kind of playing along and humoring me when I would ask questions. Things like, you know, the key points and so on from the chapter. And yeah, they were giving me some stuff, but I never really thought that I had them hooked kind of emotionally at that point. And kind of out of the blue, like I got this idea to kind of rearrange things and make sure that they were really going to be worth doing. Now, if you're making notes as we go, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to get all after the fact. But this one, I'd like you to record in some way on a piece of scrap paper for yourself as a fond remembrance of today's event. And that's that this process that I'm going to share with you should only really be used on the biggest challenge to the organization that you found out as part of your discovery process. Let me say that again. My strong recommendation is that this process is only used on the subject that is the biggest obstacle to the organization achieving their organizational goals. So I'm going to walk you through it. There's also going to be a written hand, in addition to you getting what I'm showing you now, there's also a written handout that's going to back up all this, this information. So with that, I'm just going to shrink this over so I can see what I'm saying to you guys here. So what is it? KORCSAS, which I found out today you cannot Google, or I was told that you cannot Google, it either comes up with some kind of Russian word. Yep, this is an acronym that I totally made up. But it stands for key points, obstacles, rewards of solving the obstacles. That's slightly different than the way we normally do it in our sales process. Consequences of not solving the obstacles, solutions for the overcoming the obstacles, and the action steps. Some of that certainly is going to sound vaguely familiar. So what this particular one was I remembered that the subject matter that really got me tweaked was communication. And I basically kind of out of the blue one day, again, where I was just so frustrated that I felt like people were kind of going through the motions. I said, look, can we agree that when you read this chapter on communications, none of you said, oh my God, you mean I'm really supposed to talk and communicate to other people? Can we agree that that was not necessarily a blinding flash of the obvious? So you guys have all been around the block well long enough to know, you know that you're supposed to communicate. If everybody knows that we're supposed to communicate, why don't we? What are the honest to God obstacles that are really going on here that make it so hard to have effective communication? Well, I literally filled the whiteboard in the room that we were dealing with, literally filled it. And all of a sudden, I went from there to I erased the board and basically said, okay, you got all these obstacles. What are the rewards of solving those obstacles? And just like in our own balanced scorecard sales process or our goals process, I took them through what was the upside from a dollars and cents perspective, how, if they improved communication or got some of these communication obstacles behind us, how would that kind of play out from, how would that allow them to manage differently or manage them more effectively? If they got some of these communication challenges behind them, what would be the impact on their customer or their customer base? And last and not least, how would it allow them to grow and implement differently, or grow and innovate, I should say, differently? And literally took them through a gazillion so what questions. And all of a sudden, there was well over $500,000 worth on the table in terms of quantifying some of the stuff. And it happened really quickly. And then I said, okay, if you're not able, the risk of asking the obvious question, if you're not able to solve for these obstacles, and we've just gone, you know, all the obstacles are real. I mean, there was no let's play pretend obstacles here. If you're not able to solve for the obstacles, talk to me about what that's going to mean in terms of dollars, management, customer, and innovation and growth. Now, they didn't, when I was asking the questions, they didn't know that I was asking them questions to ferret out answers within those 4 categories. But I wanted to ask those questions in kind of a seamless way. I still wanted to be in the midst of the conversation. I wanted to be a conversation. I didn't want it to be a presentation in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just adding, as they're giving me an answer, I'm kind of using the natural flow of the conversation. And I'm using, quite candidly, all of my normal selling skills and discovery skills. I'm using all of those to lead the conversation through literally, for probably 90% of the time, was all open-ended questions. There wasn't a lot of me overly directing this conversation for 2 reasons. Number one, I didn't want to. And number 2, considering that I had such a senior group of execs in the room, I knew that they knew what the answers to those questions were. So I didn't feel like I was going to have to put my teacher or my trainer hat on at all, that they were going to absolutely be able to discover all of the answers to those questions. As long as I asked some creative questions, I knew that the answers were going to be in the room. And sure enough, they did. So now I had all the rewards associated with solving for the obstacles as they're real obstacles as they really perceived them. I had all of the consequences associated with if they're not. And that's when I asked the question, so it sounds like between the rewards and the consequences that this is really kind of a big issue that really does in fact warrant management attention. Am I right? It says, oh my God, absolutely. We had no idea that these obstacles, if you will, we had been kind of glossing over them or kind of brushing our way past them. We had no idea in terms of what the real impact of having to really kind of look at these things in the kind of detail that you've just asked us to look at. We had no idea it was costing us this kind of money. So I said, okay, so it sounds like you're really committed to be able to do that. Yep. All right. And then we took it into a traditional, all right, what do we need to do to solve for those obstacles? And at that point, I still had everybody operating as a committee of the whole. And we basically I kind of rewrote some of the obstacles back on the board. I did it a little bit neater this time. And as a group started to brainstorm what were some potential solutions. Not a lot of discussion of every solution as it came up. My goal was to kind of fill the whiteboard again with possible ideas. I didn't want somebody to go into edit mode here prematurely. Before I even gave him a chance to start critiquing the solutions, I changed the game on him. And all I said was, you've got a whole board of potential solutions to these obstacles. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to write down on the piece of paper in front of you what action steps you're going to take, or what things are you going to do in the next week or in the next 14 days. But what things specifically are you going to get done in the next 14 days that will push the rock towards solving for some of these obstacles so we can increase the effectiveness of the communication? The stuff that they came out with was really, really, really good. And then after they wrote out their own individual answers, what I did then was I asked everybody to kind of take notes as their colleagues were talking of what kinds of things their colleagues were committing to do in the next 2 weeks, and could they build on that process in any way, whether it was a matter of kind of being there as a cheerleader for their colleague as they were going through this, or were there opportunities to collaborate and said, ooh, Grant wants to work on this. That sounds like something that I could be doing in my area as well. Maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration. So it took it from kind of a plastic exercise of kind of talking about communications to really making it real and putting substantive dollars on the table that they could see as really honest to God rewards or consequences if they kind of did this, and pardon my French, a half-assed way. And so it really, really, really made it come real for them. The beauty of that is everybody had something that they were walking away from that meeting with a responsibility to do. And what I did as kind of one of my last steps was, as they were talking about what they were committing to do, I was taking contemporaneous notes, so that when the next time we were getting back together, I could literally go back to around the room and say, well, last week when we talked about this, you said you were going to do this, this, and this, kind of update the group in terms of where you are. So it really built in some pure accountability, which is not unusual for what it is that we do. But everybody knew that the cost of failure was so high that it really upped the commitment a long way. So I'm going to kind of take you through a little bit. Most of this is going to be a review for the faces that I see on the call. So I kind of think about it as obstacles are usually simple. To channel Mike Slepin, as men, we trip over pebbles, we don't trip over mountains. So what needs to be overcome or changed or added or eliminated, before this problem can be solved? Kind of what blocks us from getting there? Where are we getting in our own way in terms of doing that? From a rewards, again, people have a tendency to think logic first before emotion, but by kind of taking them down this path here, what are the main or obvious benefits of solving those obstacles? Who will benefit and why? kind of taking that and parlaying that answer, what else will be able to happen? Well, we'll also be able to do this, this, and this. Oh, geez, that's pretty cool. What's the upside, or what's the benefit of doing that? And again, it tends to deepen the understanding of that, and ultimately kind of what's going to be the positive impact on others. Flipping it into the consequences, and I always say at the risk of asking the obvious, because the consequences are more than just the opposite of rewards. Kind of asking the flip of these obvious consequences: who will be hurt, what won't be able to happen, why would that be detrimental, and what will be the negative impact on others. Then we basically took it through the exact same process that I recommend that we do for goal setting, generating multiple process, giving people a chance to kind of figure out what they wanted to do in their operating area. So there was no shoulds or oughts. There was nobody kind of talking at each individual person. They could all kind of make the decisions that they thought were the right decisions for their operating area. But just as importantly, it allowed them to cherry pick the obstacles that they also thought were the most germane to their operating area. And finally, then taking it down to, okay, what are we going to actually do, to be able to make that happen? What am I going to do between myself and people in my organization to be able to solve for this problem? Ultimately, I still reinforced with them kind of my 3 levels deep when it comes to action step planning. Kind of, these are the baseline questions, if you will, that have been around for years. The way that I've kind of taken it down into a project planning perspective is, what are those things that are going to be done by you and you alone? And what's the date that each action step is going to begin? How long should it take? Do some things need to be done before others? And how often are you going to need to be able to take action? The next one is really, what are those things that need to get done by others? Doesn't matter whether they're our boss or our peers or people that are working with us or not. And all these questions are identical except for the last one. And that's going to be, what's the method of follow-up and accountability? And then last but not least, I've changed the by to with. What are those things that you're going to do with other people that so you need to have shared calendars and so on. And all of those steps are identical, including the last one. What's the method for follow-up and accountability? I usually talk about, not necessarily in the KORCSAS session, but I also usually kind of focus on understanding that we have possibility and necessity thinkers in the room, with, again, typically the possibility people kind of focusing on what's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for getting this stuff done. But again, they typically only represent 5 to 10% of the population in general. And of course, for them, they're going to want to plan forward. That's going to make the most sense. For the necessity people, which quite candidly tends to be the majority of people, order of magnitude, I'd say 85 to 95% of people are going to fall in the necessity category. For them, it's more important to not lose than it is to win. And so they're going to basically be better off if they kind of start their plan from kind of a drop dead date and kind of plan backwards back to the start date. But that's really kind of the that's really kind of where the whole thing kind of plans. So yeah, it's almost like taking the goals planning sheet, if you will, and kind of twisting it on its head a little bit. The reason why I said what I said is this needs to be done very much on purpose, is that if you really do a masterful job of mining for gold, if you will, during that time frame, there is a finite number of rewards and a finite number of of consequences that are going to come up in the course of a business kind of thing. There's not going to be 10,000. It's going to be a discrete number. And the same advantages or consequences of solving for communication are going to be very similar to the advantages and disadvantages of being a good time manager, of being a good project manager, of having a well-structured performance appraisal and discipline process. And so if you go to that well more than once, max twice in the course of an 8 to 10 week facilitation, people are going to go, I already know where this is going. And it's not going to have anywhere near the same amount of power than it has when they're kind of discovering this for itself. Wendy, can I put you to work for a minute? Yes?
Sure.
Can you create just a blank piece of paper and do a screen share with us? And would you kind of act as our resident typist for a minute?
Come on. Waiting for my Word to open. Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to ask everybody to kind of play along with me, just so you can experience this as participants, if that's all right. I'm going to, and so let's go ahead and put in the key point was that effective communication is important. That's what everybody got out of the chapter. So, and again, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and use your participants screen here and use the hand raising function. So everybody in this room knows that communication is important. But if it's so important, kind of, why don't we have it already? What are the obstacles that are really impacting effective communication here? And for purposes of all of this, we're all part of one company. Go ahead and would somebody get me started by raising a hand, and we'll go. Adam, go ahead and give me one.
People assume the communication has happened when it hasn't.
Great, thank you. Adam, who's next? Or who can I hear from next?
I can go ahead. This is Bob Fritz.
Yep, Bob, go ahead.
Sometimes people don't want to interrupt somebody else in their workday to have that conversation, and therefore the communication fails.
Cool, thank you, Bob. Anybody else have one that they experience here on a regular basis?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I think that I don't need to communicate with others. I have the idea that I need to make it happen.
Okay. Don't need to communicate with others. Anybody else that has an idea of why communication is not as effective here as it could be?
Many managers think that communication is not that important. Just do what I say.
Got it. Yeah, be reasonable. Do it my way, right? Steve Terasaki, followed by Jerry Houston.
I like to keep my silos in place, and I fear that if I give too much, communicate too much, then I'm going to give away information.
Ah. The power resides with the person who knows, right? Jerry, go ahead.
I haven't allowed enough time for this project, so I just have to get it done. There's no time to communicate.
Got it. Bob Kinney.
Yeah, logistics of just getting everybody together.
So logistical challenges?
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Who's next? Nancy?
Okay, there I am. People don't really listen. There's that saying that people listen with the intent of responding as opposed to listening with the intent of understanding.
Super.
Thank you. I won't even make you repeat it, although under normal circumstances I would. Charles Rees.
Yeah, people communicate to their staff and then assume that they will communicate it to their reports.
Got it. So they're expecting that to kind of go down the line, but it doesn't always.
Right.
The old game of telephone. Bill Kelly.
I'm embarrassed that my comments won't be elevated enough for the group. In other words, I'm the low man on the totem pole.
Okay.
I don't think so.
We know better.
Anybody else that has a, or anybody else who has a,
Yeah.
I'll throw one out.
Yes,
Well-
people are too stupid to understand what we need them to do. We just need to tell them to do it.
Yeah, it's about the same modification of that false assumption about what the other person understands or is starting from.
Got it. Thank you, Grant. Let's give it.
Say that again, Grant.
Wait a minute. Let's give Wendy a chance to catch up.
False assumptions about what the other person understands.
Thank you.
Bob, are you back or with a
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If people are distracted, they're on their phones or tablets or laptops.
Thank you. Mr. Reese.
Yeah, different interpretations of the same event.
Well, obviously, if you and I disagree, you're wrong. As long as we understand that, we'll get along fine, right?
Exactly.
I would, this is Jerry, I would add that people are getting so reliant on chat and on email that it limits the understanding of the communication, which creates all kinds of challenges.
I'll just throw in one that we've got people on multiple shifts. Anybody else have any others?
You can also look at it the other way from Bob, in that some people refuse to use email and chat and whatnot, and that creates problems.
Mhm.
In some cases, we could almost call that technophobia, right?
Right. Depends on the organization,
Yeah.
culture.
Got it?
Social or hierarchical level differences.
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can say social. Okay.
How do you want to make that?
That's when it's H.
So, hey, Wendy,
H-I-E-R period.
if I can say it, you can spell it.
Wendy, it's okay to do H-I-E-R period.
Yeah, that's right.
I gave you the out, Wendy.
Hierarchy of what?
or social level differences. Maybe you put perceived in front of that whole thing.
Oh, Grant, now you're just being mean.
You're doing good, Wendy.
You'll notice I did not.
This is over. Jeez.
You notice I did not volunteer myself for this duty. Wendy, if you'll go ahead and let's start so taking a look at this, what's the upside? What are some upsides of being able to solve for some of these rewards? Or what are the rewards of solving for some of these obstacles? And they don't have to be in any particular order, just top of mind. What's the upside of solving for this? Who wants to start us out?
Quality product.
Or even more simply, better communication.
Alignment of goals.
The actual timelines to accomplish things are shortened.
Okay. Adam still had one.
So how about this?
You know, less time wasted, less rework.
Okay.
Keeps us on track and on time.
So, just out of guess, Adam, what would you guess the amount of rework that we could save kind of by if communication improved? Order of magnitude, what do you think we're talking about in terms of dollars?
It's that's a tough one because I mean the industry. I would say the time on task would be about 95% more efficient. So if something costs $100,000, $200,000, you know, or something sold, you know, take $200,000, $100,000 would be the real cost.
Wow. So 100. So we
Huge.
got,
It's
we have
huge.
100
It's the single worst thing.
So we have $100,000 on the table already. Okay. What's another reward of because we can kind of tie the quality product in with the wasted time, can't we? If we make it right the first time.
I would
Hey,
also
Rick, hey, Rick, what do you see as one of the upsides of fixing this, Rick?
Less time wasted, less rework. Already on there.
Got it. Okay.
I would also say team building. So now I'm being heard. I'm valued.
Got it. So just to kind of pursue that a little bit, when people feel like they're part of a team or they're valued, what's the upside of that, Bertha?
The upside is I want to give more. I count, I matter. I want to do more to get to the goals.
Okay. So there's a willingness there.
Yes.
If order of magnitude, if people were more willing to kind of put themselves out or kind of really jump in, what kind of projects do you think could get done that are not getting done now?
Innovations, improvements.
Okay. Charles, any guess in terms of what might be on the table on that one?
Size of the organization, but I think you're talking same magnitude, 100K in most organizations.
Got it. Bob, I see your hand up. Did I miss you?
No, it's been covered now. Thank
Okay.
you, though.
Got it.
Steve mentioned alignment of goals, but a lot of time what I see in the technical area is people working on a blind alley in product development. In other words, they are not aligned with where they are where the team's trying to go, and they're just developing stuff that's not useful to the main effort. And so if you're, if it's going to cost $2 million to design the product, then how much of that time is wasted? So in some cases, that's just the messiness of innovation. And other times, it's just pure wasted time because people don't know what they should be doing. Another 100,000.
Well, in my experience, it doubles the cost of the program.
Yeah, there you go. Probably.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. When you think about doubling the cost of the program,
Yeah.
knowing that cost comes right off the bottom line, right?
Sure.
So if I handed your company a check payable to your firm for $100,000, what would that allow you to do that you can't do now? Anything?
Hire another key employee.
There you go. And do you have an idea of what key employee you have in mind? What position have you been dying to fill that right now you can't afford?
Engineer or a manager.
Yeah.
Okay. If you had a full-time engineer that you don't have now, what kind of projects would you be having him or her work on that you've really been itching to get done?
Incorporate a new technology.
Okay. And why is incorporating that new technology so important, Charles?
Higher value, higher margins. Generally speaking, most companies, if you're paying $100,000 for an engineer, you expect $500,000 in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And typical profit margins in your industry are what?
60% margins in this industry.
So on a $500K contribution, that's $300,000 coming into your life.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have any trouble figuring out how to spend another $300,000?
I think it would be really hard. No.
You might have to have 2 cups of coffee to figure it out, right?
Yeah, and sort of along this line of adding another reward, more efficient onboarding, which goes right along with what we were just talking about. And if you can shorten the training period,
Yeah,
the learning curve, a lot of savings there.
got it. Thank you, Grant. The other thing is what happens to somebody's morale when the onboarding process feels really well put together versus what happens to somebody's morale when the onboarding feels like kind of random at best.
Right.
Doug, we talked about this. You also have better quality decision making by individual employees.
Got it. Thank you. Did I lose Wendy?
Another thing that's important then is communication, not listed, is the continuous improvement process, the post-project reviews, the incident reviews about what did we do right, what did we do wrong.
And getting people to put up with them.
Yeah, exactly.
So it really becomes that whole spiral of it creates a culture. It really kind of creates a culture of excellence, doesn't it? That people are always looking at, cool, what's next? So right now, kind of looking at it quickly, have we covered financial rewards associated with becoming a better communicator?
I think so.
And how about your ability to manage the business?
Much better.
And impact on the customer? Right, less rework, making shipping dates and all that kind of good stuff. And the innovation and growth we've just spent some time talking about. So now let's talk about what are some of the consequences of not getting these obstacles behind us?
Poor morale.
Or loss of
Grant, tell me a little bit more about what poor morale has meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When you say
I guess just building on what Bertha had said earlier, the previous list I thought was a little bit too operational and not quite enough about people. And so that's the reason I brought that up, is the consequences of bad communications of not improving it is that the people's attitudes, the people's ability to stretch themselves to perform at high level are certainly affected by the way we communicate.
Or worst case is retention.
Yep.
Yeah, I put in there
Yeah,
as
right.
less engaged.
I'm sorry, Steve, what was that?
I put in there as less engaged.
Yep.
Disengagement. Mhm.
And what's the downside of less engaged? What's the so what behind that?
Employee turnover.
Okay.
Missed targets.
Yep.
Bad quality.
Absenteeism.
That's when
People
people are
just do
calling.
it.
That's when people are calling in with a mental health day. So with employee turnover, does anybody have a sense of where employee turnover is today?
Well, voluntary or involuntary?
Involuntary. Voluntary.
Are you asking a hypothetical question for this company we're talking about, or what?
I am.
Okay.
Good is under 2%. Average is probably around 5%, and bad is more than that.
And where are you?
Oh, you just assume from it your average of 5%.
Okay. So how much of that 5% do you think may be attributable to people feeling less than engaged because we're not really doing a great job communicating with them? What's the window of opportunity that we're probably realistically looking at?
It's probably 80% of your turnover.
So 80% of the 5%?
Yeah.
So roughly 4%?
Yep.
What do you think would be a reasonable target to be shooting for if we're currently at 5 and people really got serious about communication? What do you think would be a reasonable target to achieve in the next 12 to 18 months?
Months, I don't know, 40% improvement.
So that would basically take it from 5 to 3?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do we think 2%, savings of 2% in, what do we think 2% is worth? Taking turnover from 5% to 3%.
Well, 100-person company, you're probably talking you're probably talking a couple $100,000.
Okay. I'll buy that, because even with the retention, even at the very, very minimum, right?
Mm.
Between the hiring process, the onboarding process, you know, how much time is a manager spending bringing somebody up to speed?
Right.
You know, they're typically not working at 100% effectiveness from day zero with the company. You know, so there's always a curve in terms of getting people up the curve. And what's happening to the manager's effectiveness, particularly if they're trying to train multiple people simultaneously, what kinds of projects is the manager not able to get to that they would normally get to, because they're spending almost all of their extra time, if you will, kind of on the care and feeding of a new employees to make sure that they're really kind of doing a good job. So that sounds like a pretty dramatic. So that couple $100,000 number is probably conservative.
Yeah,
Bob,
I was actually thinking about search. I was thinking, like, if it's a key employee, you're paying $30,000 to $50,000 for a search.
Got it. So this could this number here is definitely bigger than a bread box. Right?
Yeah.
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of talking about the wrong problem. The retention thing, yet the Band-Aid is off and the sore is bleeding. You can see that. We looked at I think it was Gallup did the survey in 2012, and it was true before that. And I just checked it this year. 66 to 69% of employees are disengaged at work. These folks aren't leaving, they're retired in place. They're much more expensive than the numbers you're talking about. Imagine being able to engage the people that are there and not have to worry about hiring new people. Imagine what that would be worth. I dare say it's 5 times that number.
Wow. Got it. So now we've basically identified somewhere order of magnitude 500 grand or more in terms of the rewards. We've talked about the consequences. There's another couple of $100,000 on the table. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have to ask you, is $750,000 a large enough number to get your attention, or isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
And so assuming it is, Wendy, if you'll go ahead and start, what are some potential solutions that we could start to implement to kind of help us get some of these obstacles behind us?
Hire Paradigm Associates to come in and get us straightened out.
There you go. You're hired. Or I'm hired. Every group needs a shill. Thank you. What else can you do here internally? Or what kinds of things do you need to start implementing?
Look at the communication strategy that you have. What meetings are we having? And like have a weekly huddle meeting, stand-up meeting at the same time, and then have that cascade out to the various folks. But look at all the different, what are the meetings that we have and what are we covering and what might we be missing?
Got it. Are people currently trained in terms of how to do that?
Generally, no.
Okay. So we may need to kind of do some upskilling in terms of running some of these kind of a new type of huddle meeting, or making the huddle meetings that we have more effective. Wendy, would you just scroll up to the obstacles one more time, just to let people see kind of top of mind what we're working with here?
Another solution, though, is like a dialogue exercise for the managers. You've got to get through the ego.
Okay. What other kinds of things might we do?
Ask everybody. I mean, ask everybody. Get past the hierarchy. Don't try to limit yourself to what you can imagine as being an improvement. Ask everybody.
What would you ask them?
I would say, I think we have a communication problem among us. What do you think we could do about it? What would you like to see done?
Okay, so you're talking about a really simple, basic question.
A very basic question, because otherwise I'm going to put some biases on it. And my own blind spot may get in the way of the answer that works best for everybody.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Anything else?
Maybe some team building exercises, Doug?
Okay.
To encourage camaraderie and openness.
Like it?
Of course, communication styles through the behavioral assessments is a tool that can be used to help people understand different communication styles.
And what do you see the upside of that to be?
The upside is if I understand that that Doug, you need more time to process because of your behavioral style, then I can't expect a quick reaction. We can't be communicating with everyone in the same exact way. We have to consider who they are. Right.
Got it. Thanks. Anything else?
Process review to really make sure you have the right measures. And by process, I really mean cross-functional cooperation.
Got it. Cool.
Implement easy Kaizen, where everybody develops and implements their own ideas on a daily basis, small incremental improvements. Keep track of them, but then you can thank them and praise them and so on.
Yeah, praise is certainly an important tool in the toolbox, isn't it? Catching people doing things right.
Something right, yeah. It's the best program for that, I think. At least what I've seen.
Cool. I'm just watching the time here. Would on any piece of paper, on any piece of paper that you have handy, would you write down one or two things that you're going to do over the next couple of the next week or two to be able to get some of these things implemented and behind us? Bob, would you give me an example of what is it that you're going to try to do in the next couple of weeks to help us solve this problem?
Which Bob, me?
Yes, sorry, Bob Kinney.
Yeah.
You should have known I was looking at you.
Yeah, I would do the, start with the huddle, kick off the huddle practice. Although I agree with Adam that I've always started by asking everybody, making sure everybody understands where we're at overall with communication, and that we want to improve it. We need everybody's ideas and, you know, who wants to be on that team to figure out how we can improve communication. But then the first thing I would do is that huddle meeting.
Thanks. Bill Kelly, what are you going to do in the next week or two?
I'm going to send everybody a link to the assessment.
Thanks. Bertha?
I had something similar to Bob. I'm going to start to check in with the team to make sure that we're all on board with our new style.
Got it.
I have meetings weekly. What are we going to do going forward?
Tom Lemansky, you want to take yourself off of mute and contribute here?
I can take myself off of mute. I'm not sure what I'll contribute, but because I signed in late. But I do like the idea. You know, why don't we ask? Let's get outside the ivory tower and ask everybody what's wrong with communication here, and how do we fix it?
Got it. Thank you. I see Adam raised his hand. Adam.
Yeah, mostly to dovetail off what Tom and Bob have said. One of the problems was people being afraid to contribute. So I would immediately set up an anonymous suggestion box, for lack of a better term, of how better to communicate. You get enough of the answers, you're going to figure out who it was. More to the point, it really doesn't matter. You're going to implement those actions anyway. So, you know, try to encourage people who wouldn't otherwise join the team, as it was said.
Got it. Got it. So at this point, there's a couple things that I'd like to do to just to kind of put a bow on this. First and foremost is I'd really like to thank Wendy. If you saw me trying to do what she did with her letting the fingers do the walking, I can promise you it would not be a happy experience for you guys. So Wendy, thank you for your keyboarding skills. I really appreciate that you were willing to that you were willing to be thrown into the lurch. That is literally what I will do for whatever the main obstacle is to the main goal that we were asked to be brought in. But as you can see, when you think about the breadth of the things that we covered from a rewards perspective and the breadth of what we covered from a consequences perspective, there's only so many times that you can ask a question and you're going to keep going back to that same well over and over again, and it's really going to lose its impact. So I really try to get very, very selective in terms of where I use this. But I'd be curious. Bob, go ahead.
I was just going to say that what came really clear to me in this whole thing is that I always kind of looked at rewards or consequences. There's really both. You know, those numbers are all cumulative. They all add upon each other. It's not one or the other. It's both rewards and consequences. That I just sort of had that light bulb go off today.
Yeah, we're stacking the deck in our favor by making sure that the absolute value, if you will, of both the accumulation of the rewards and the avoidance of the consequences are really both on both sides of the fulcrum.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what really what makes this thing add up so quickly. Any other comments or thoughts, or quite candidly, I've got about a minute or two before I have to prep for my 4 o'clock. But any other comments or questions or things that I can clarify in the couple of minutes that we have remaining?
I just want to make an observation, Doug, and that is, and it brought back memories of watching you facilitate other things, but it's this idea of drilling down on the question. So they answer the question and say, and then what? And then what? And then what? And that really is powerful because it forces them to really think about it, not just give an answer, right? So that's a great facilitation technique.
Thank you. Thank you.
Likewise,
That's the initiator of the original rack clap. These Zoom meetings lack a few things. So we can't clap because it would be chaotic. But we can do what the hearing impaired people do. We can put our hands up and do our congratulations dance. There you go.
We can do this too. This means more.
Yeah, you got on the reactions. There's a clap as well, but certainly thank you for Wendy. Any other comments or Tom?
Doug, I want you to know I've been keeping what has become one of my favorite questions, and I see you're keeping it alive as well. What will that enable you to do that you can't do now? I mean, that just quantifies, it so easily quantifies, and I just love that question.
Fantastic.
I like just the whole story in the beginning, going off script with a group of people and probing right on the spot.
Yeah, you certainly understand. You certainly understand what's really important to them. And I got to admit, in the spots where I've done this, the customer feedback that I get routinely is that they really understand that this truly makes it all about them and their organization. There is nothing canned about what we're doing here, because I'm not ever trying to concoct an issue. The issues occur naturally, and when you help people solve issues that are really important to them, man, does that make them feel good about the time that you're spending together.
Time well spent.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's one of the nicest compliments that I can receive. Wendy, I turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Doug, for sharing that with us this afternoon. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day, and we'll be putting handouts on the affiliate website under Learning Labs. So stay tuned for that. There'll be some handouts that will be posted to the website.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you,
guys.
Take care, everyone.
Happy implementing. Bye-bye.